All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison. This is Web Wednesday, the show where we bring on some really cool people to chat about all things web development. And today that tradition continues. I'm really excited to bring Beth Pan back on. For those of you who don't remember, Beth works on the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, which is a really neat set of controls and so forth that you can add to any web page to help enhance it, access the Microsoft 365 Graph APIs, and do a lot of other really neat things. But you didn't come here to hear me talk about it. You came here to hear Beth talk about it. So let me go ahead bring Beth on. Beth, thanks again for coming back and doing this again.
Oh yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm glad I can be part of the really cool people to talk about things on Web Wednesday.
Really cool people. Really cool
That's
people.
what you said. You were like, we have some really cool people on the show.
See?
And I was like, oh, well,
See?
I'm now one of the really cool people.
So every now and then I do say nice things about you. By the way, for anybody who's just tuning in, Beth and I are friends. I think we could say friends.
I don't know. Friends, enemy, rivalries, lots of words.
All the above.
All of the above. That's true.
Oh, cool. All right.
We do hang out outside of work, so I guess that classifies us as friends.
Yeah, friends. Yeah, yeah. Even if we can't find sushi in the afternoon, but
That's true.
it's a different conversation. So
It's over another
let's
time.
let's start with this. Who is Beth Pan? What do you do?
Sure. Let's talk about who's Beth Pan. So my name is Beth. I work for I guess the partner arm of the Windows organization. Our team's name is called Apps, which stands for Application Partners and Store. If you have been watching the new Windows 11 release, you've seen some of the new store announcements. So that's part of what my team does. But specifically, I help with the first-party and third-party developer ecosystems to build on top of Microsoft technology. Specifically, recently we've been focusing on, how do we enable developers to build with Microsoft Graph. So that brings us to one of the tools around Microsoft Graph, which is Microsoft Graph Toolkit, which our team started, and we're slowly expanding to other charters, including, how do you build Microsoft Graph-enabled applications on Windows, and cross-platform apps, and how does that translate into our partner work and open source community as well.
Okay. Well, that sounds fun. Although I do have one real basic question. What is Graph?
So Microsoft Graph is a API that rules it all. You can access things such as M365 data, Windows 10, security, information, and managing devices. So it's an API that unifies all the APIs that Microsoft used to, or some of all the APIs that Microsoft used to have. We're slowly onboarding more verticals as we go. So this is definitely the future. And the benefit of using Microsoft Graph is you kind of get a unified identity model, which using the Microsoft Identity Platform, you can authenticate your users to use different services, such as things like Microsoft Word, OneNote, Microsoft To Do, Outlook, Teams. So before Graph was a thing, you'd have to authenticate or use different authentication models to work with these services separately. So now, because we the identity model is unified, you are able to authenticate once and then utilize a lot of these rich data behind the scenes and help your users or customers be productive in their everyday life.
Okay. We actually have a question right along those lines then from Guacamole, who asks. Now I'm just hungry. But anyway, they ask, do you have to use Azure AD with Graph or Azure Active Directory with Graph?
I think that's the the easiest way to connect with Graph. Um, I have actually never tried other ways, but I know that we have customers who would use identity providers such as not providers, more like a tooling that unifies all the providers, including Azure AD, to access different resources? So that's a good question. I will get more information after this call, and hopefully Christopher will send on or respond as appropriate.
You can also find Beth on Twitter. You can see her handle right up above her head there. So cool. So
Yeah. It's a very good question. I'm gonna ask like one of my coworkers right away, but let's keep going.
Okay. So what is then the Graph Toolkit? So now we know Graph is this unified set of APIs, one ring to rule them all. What is Graph Toolkit?
So Graph Toolkit is a collection of reusable web components and authentication providers that help you work with and connect to the Microsoft Graph. This means, before the toolkit, if you wanted to work with the graph, there were many different auth flows that you have to, sort of root through and think about who's your customer, what kind of tech stack that you have, what's the right authentication flow for you. But now with Microsoft Graph Toolkit, there are significantly, we are trying to help you significantly to reduce the amount of time that you spend in developing and working with Microsoft Graph, which means that we wanted to make authentication easy. We wanted to make working with Graph super easy by exposing, only the necessary piece of the client, and then adding on to benefit such as, you can write just a single line or couple lines of code in order to add some sort of functionable HTML element into your web application or Teams application. There's other platforms as well in order to work with the graph. So overall, we just wanted to make developers' life easy to work with the graph. So we're improving every now and then. People will be like, what about this platform? And what if I wanted to build on Electron app? So recently we released the Electron authentication provider. Or people would be like, what if I wanted to build native Windows applications? So not as part of the Graph Toolkit, but our team has been investigating and releasing packages around how to also use, part of the Windows Community Toolkit packages to work with the graph as well.
Very cool. All right. Well, I know that you really want to start showing off some neat little things. So I think I'm just going to kind of leave this part open-ended. Is where do you want to start? How do you want to start showing us some of the cool things with Graph Toolkit?
How about, just as a recap of last time, let's just go ahead and do like a quick web application of seeing, how to get started. How
Sure.
about that?
Sounds perfect.
Okay, let me find my console. So
do you want to zoom in a bit,
in the background?
Bigger?
Yeah, sorry. I'm gonna open up a new tab here. If I can, maybe I'll do this and make it bigger. That better?
Yeah, that works. Yep.
Okay. So let's do this. I'm gonna create. I guess I created a folder already. Okay. So I'm just gonna go to this simple folder and see what's in the index.html page real quick.
What did I create the other day? And then
I know. I was trying to see like what is going on with there. Actually, that's too much code that we don't need. So I'm gonna let's start from the scratch.
Right.
I'm just gonna create a directory under one of my events. I'm gonna say make directory simple demo. And then I'm gonna go to this folder that I just created. And you can see there's nothing in there. And I just clear my screen so that it doesn't go too far down. And then now I'm gonna just create a file real quick. Let's call it index.html.
Clever name.
Super clever. And I'm gonna use Visual Studio Code to open it. If you've never used Visual Studio Code, it's a code editor that's fairly popular and has a lot of benefits. and you can install the command line, which code is the way to open it. So let me make this bigger too. Now you can see that there's index.html and there's really nothing on this file. I'm just gonna go ahead and use the boilerplate HTML file that you can start with by typing the exclamation mark, and it just scaffolds for you.
Which is so cool.
So as you can see, nothing's in here, right? Like just some default stuff in the head and then HTML text, and then there's nothing in the body. So first thing we're going to do is introduce the Microsoft Graph Toolkit package as part of this project. So how do we get started with Microsoft Graph Toolkit? Let's go look at the documentation. I'm going to come over here to my browser, go to aka.mx-mgt-docs. I'm also going to make this bigger. Don't worry, in a minute. Probably big enough, yeah?
Yep, yeah, that looks good.
Okay, so this is the home for Microsoft Graph Toolkit documentations. On the left side, you have a nav. On the right side is the main content. And under Use the Toolkit, you can see there's a Get Started section, and we have different documentations for different ways of getting started with the Graph Toolkit. So in the overview section of getting started, I'm just going to scroll down and grab this script tag. Because we're just going to do a HTML page that has some scripts and some HTML, and then we're going to render it using live server and see how it looks like. So I copy this line, come back here. I'm going to edit right above. So the script is edited, and then in the body tag, after the Microsoft Graph Toolkit is introduced, there are two things that you need to do. One is to initialize your authentication provider. So this will depend on what kind of application that you're building. Because we're building a web application, there are two choices that you have. One is to use the MSAL1 provider. The other one is the MSAL2 provider, which we recently released. These two providers actually use different authentication flows. The MSAL2 provider offers a little bit more options, and if you want to do multi-user login, that's something that you will want to pick. Again, there's documentations on all of these providers under here, and you can.
You're not expecting everybody to just remember all of this.
Read a little bit more about this. The MSAL provider uses the implicit flow. So when you're registering your app, you need to enable implicit flow, and also like the implicit tokens in Azure Active Directory. The MSAL2 provider actually uses a Pixie flow, which is, I think it's the code authorization flow. So you add all of these information as part of your, if you've done this before, as part of your authentication claim, and then it will return you all the good information to help you figure out who the user is trying to sign in. So we're actually going to use the MSAL2 provider today. I'm going to go back to get started and see how I can add this in there. So right here, it says MSAL2 provider. I just need a client ID, and then I can go ahead and use some of the components that as part of the Graph Toolkit. So I'm going to copy these two lines. Again, because this is all because we're just building a simple HTML page. And you can see if you wanted to build something using like, Node.js or React or Angular, you can definitely import the package as part of the npm install. So I'm going to go back here and just drop these two lines in here. What we're going to do is, I have some client ID already registered. I don't know if people are interested in looking at this, but I can show you very quickly how to create the client ID as well.
That's something you just go in and do in the portal, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Do you think we should show it?
No, I think we're good there. Yeah.
Okay. So, and again, if you want to see like how this is done, there's documentation in the Graph Toolkit documentation that I just showed you. So there's a client ID that already pre-registered that works with the MSAL provider, or MSAL2 provider. This requires you to register your app as a single page application. And then I just clicked save. So now let's go ahead and click go live and see what happens. Live server is
one of the best Visual Studio Code extensions.
So I was gonna say live server is one of the extensions that you can get from the marketplace.
Yeah, I'm gonna go grab the link
And
right
then,
now.
right, so it's just kind of, it spins up a web server for you in the background and serves the pages in the media folder. And if it's index.html, then you can just go to this link directly. I'm actually going to change this port number here really quick. I'm going to change it back to 5500. The reason that I want it to be 5500 is because when you were registering your app, there's return URLs that's associated with it, and 5500 is one of them. So that's why I changed it back to it. So now let's go ahead and get started. Maybe I have something else that's on. 1 second. Let's see. I do have something else that's on. I thought I was prepared. Clearly not. That's something else on. Okay, now we're on 5500. So I'm gonna come here, go to localhost 5500, and you can see that here's the login button right here. The reason it's already logged in is because I am using Edge and logged in as this profile, and I probably logged in as this user in some other tabs as part of the preparation. So that's why you see the login button and my name on it, and my little, giraffe with a toolbox. So it's toolkit.
That's clever. I get it.
That's the Graph Toolkit. I know you're so impressed with me, but I didn't create this. Our designer actually created this, so all props to her.
All right.
Anyways, now you can see with only
By the way,
a couple lines of code.
Chat thinks you're a funny one, so if that helps.
It really helps. Yes, that's what I strive to do, to be the funny one. So now you can see, like, after we created this page, there's only, we only added 3 lines of code, and now you have a fully functioning Microsoft Graph connected application with a login button. And things that we could do from here on are, I can say I wanted to add my agenda. So this is going to go to my calendar and look at like what's on my calendar, and then retrieve all of my agenda item. And now like you can see, there's nothing else that I did, right? I just added one HTML tag and then like saved it. And this shows, my meetings and who's attending the meeting information. If I hover over these attendees, you can see a little bit more details about them. Let's actually hover over a real person. So there's more information on, how to contact these people, what does their work look like, emails between me and them, files to share between us, and information about Isaiah. If it's connected with, things like LinkedIn. So there you go. That's the kind of how to quickly get started with Microsoft Graph Toolkit in a HTML setting, or in a, like the most simple web setting. And we were talking about like what are the other platforms that are available. And since we've started, we've added support for SharePoint. You can do SharePoint web parts, Teams apps. We've also recently released a Teams SSO provider that help you to single sign-on within Teams app. And it works really well with the Teams toolkit, which was built by the Teams team. There's a lot of teams in that sentence. I know, but just bear with me. We're like, we as a company has the most creative ways of naming our products, so that's just what it is. And we also offer providers such as proxy provider if you want to bring in your own backend authentication and just kind of proxy the data between your own backend and the front end. And we have simple provider that can help you pass the token between front end and back end. And there is also the Electron provider that I was just talking about that help you build native applications that run quote unquote anywhere. And then the reason that we are building, or we built these web app components, is because that these are standard, web standard components that anything and everything that comes with web components that comes with these. Okay, that's like, let's quickly get started. 20 minutes has passed.
Yeah.
So today I'm actually coming back to show you a little bit more on, you know, a little bit more advanced techniques of working with Graph, starting with things like, you know, what if my organization is not branded like M365? What are the things that I can do to change the look and feel of these components? Or if I want to bring my own data into these components, how do I do that? Or like working with the data that to represent a different way and on your UI versus the existing way that Microsoft's Graph Toolkit is working with. So how does that look like? So let's go ahead and look at those scenarios.
Okay.
So the first thing that I'm going to show you is our component playground. So if you go to, right here, it's too small. Sorry, I can't enlarge this part. I guess it's part of the browser. If you go to mgt.dev, it's our component playground. This is a place we kind of sandboxed solutions so where you don't have to really join the developer program or, you know, even go to Azure to create that client ID yourself. Before that, you can add it to your app. Here, you can just see how all the components work, how they look like, what are the functionalities behind the scenes, and, you know, copy and paste code from this code editor as you modify them to be your likings. So we were talking about how do we change the look and feel of these components. If you look at one of the most recent components that we introduced is called Mgt File List. This goes to your OneDrive to get the files in your OneDrive based on the path that you provide for this component. So by default, this goes to my root folder of my OneDrive, just gets all of the folders and files in there. I can like even go show more, it'll keep going and go find them more. But you can also provide things like, you know, I wanted to get files by a query, and this is the query that I wanted to use to retrieve these files, and that's the list that comes with it. But that's all, you know, attributes and properties tricks that you can look at from documentation, but we're going to look at, you know, how to use custom CSS properties. So still, you might realize that these looks a lot different from what I just showed you as the default look and feel. And what happened behind the scenes is a very important aspect of web components is called encapsulation. And this is very useful because you will be able to keep the markup structure and style and behavior hidden and separate from, you know, the other code on the page so that different parts doesn't clash together, or the code can be kept nice and clean. So this is why web components have many benefits of using them. And then together it comes with challenges of how do I pick how do I select the items in the DOM tree in order to style them, right? So to make it easy, we're using custom CSS properties for the reason that it can actually pierce the shadow DOM. So for
just
each of the
break that
components
down a little bit. So then the output that we're seeing there, what that Mgt file list component is doing, it's actually just generating a bunch of HTML. So on there, I've got like a table and a border and the folder icon and the little like div or span tags for all of like the name and the modified and so forth. And so that's what you're talking about, trying to get in and then modify with the CSS, is how to modify that, because that obviously would then get tricky to figure out how to target those items.
Exactly. So if you look at the console, developer console, right here in Mgt File List, there's a shadow root. This is what I'm talking about for the shadow DOM. A lot of the ways you have to like specifically select these things with, you know, like the dir or dir. It's very cumbersome to select it to write CSS that way because it's in a shadow root. So the way that to go around, or like the right way to do it, is to expose CSS custom properties for developers to utilize, which is what we did. Every component that we built, we have a list of custom CSS properties for you to change the look and feel of the components. So you can simply say, I'm going to select the file list on this page, or if you file list have some CSS attached to it, you can do like .css, just as how you select your CSS classes. And then once the item is selected, you can say, you know, I wanted to change the background of my file list, or the hover effect, or the color of the hover of the background, or active. so far and so forth. And if I change this now, you'd be able to see maybe teal. The background changes to teal, and the hover is still like the same. And if I wanted to do like the border to be, I don't know, red, then the top of the border would be red. You can change all of the 4 borders and things like that, and like size of the font, color of the font. So very easily you can change the look of the component to fit whatever your style of the website's looking like.
And that looks about like a color scheme that I would wind up picking.
This is my coworker told me this is a very Hello Kitty with the giant like dot around it, and the light green and yellow and red color. So I can take the Hello Kitty color.
Too funny. Okay, and so then all of those and the 2 dashes is a like a vendor specific tag. So all of those you can see then on that little playground. And so you, like you were saying, you could just go in, modify that, and then copy and paste that into your CSS.
Exactly. So, and the way to find out what are these custom CSS properties, you can either go to this Docs tab in the playground.
Oh, cool.
And then right here, custom CSS properties. If I scroll down, scroll up, right here, it kind of has a description and all of the list of what are the ones that's available. The other way to find out these CSS custom properties is if you go to each component. For example, we just looked at file list. If I go to agenda, right here down at the bottom, you can see these are the available CSS custom properties that you can use for each component.
Very cool.
Okay, so that's how to change color of your components. And the other cool thing about the out-of-the-box themes are we actually built a dark theme into each and every one of these components, utilizing the CSS custom property themselves. So you can see each component have a dark version of, like if you are like Christopher, who really likes dark theme everything. And if I go to MPT,
for whatever it's worth, I'm a relatively recent convert into the dark theme. That it probably wasn't until about like a year and a half ago that I slowly like migrated over. I'm like, oh my gosh, it makes such a huge difference. Like I'm far less fatigued at the end of the day with dark theme than I am with light theme.
Yeah, I can't say about you. It's like the more that I work on these things, the darker my soul becomes. So it's just the darker the color scheme. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, so you can always add a class that's called mgt-dark to your components in order to apply dark theme to any of them. The other way to apply a dark theme is, I know I'm going really fast. Hopefully this is
no, it's still it's still good.
I'll come back and look at it. Okay, sounds good. So the other way that you can do it is there's a sample right here called theme under general in samples. You can see how these themes are cascaded, meaning like if I put it as a high level class, how everything else under it is actually applied is except when you specifically or specify like that you want to change the theme. So you can apply them to multiple components together by adding it only once on a parent div.
Again, just make everything dark theme. Yeah, no reason to switch back and forth. Just dark theme all the things.
There you go. So that's kind of how to change the look and feel of my components, which is one of the most most asked questions when we're doing these kind of like 101 is how to get started, and immediately people say, well, but what if I don't want the M365 look and feel? And I was like, okay, well, here's how you can do it.
That's probably like every time I teach somebody Bootstrap, or back when I used to do SharePoint dev, like the number one question was, okay, that's great. Now, how do I make it look completely different from that?
Exactly. Now that I know how to use it, how do I use like the opposite of all this stuff?
I know you spent all of this time making my life really, really easy and allowing me to do something with just like one line of HTML. That's great and all, but now I want to change everything.
Yes. So the next question that always comes with the community is, what if I wanted to change the presentation of the data because you already got the data for me through your component, right? These components are fully functional. They're JavaScript behind the scenes. They are already combined to some sort of graph API. So what if I'm already logged in, so I wanted to use the login data to show something different. How do I do that? So
So maybe like
I'm
do
going to show
like
you.
a different sort or a filter or something like that.
Right.
Okay.
So there's this thing called template in web components where you can add something like, and this is a web standard as well. If you've been written HTML code, then you've probably seen this before in other web components. So you can apply templates into the Microsoft Graph Toolkit components and use these custom templates to modify the content of these components. And all of our web components support templates based on this template element. And there are different templates within each component. Again, where to see them, you got to go to the docs and look at what are the templates that's available. So once you figure out the templates that is available for you, what you can do is add a data for tag. Or did I type? Ugh, if I can type. Data type tag.
If you can type data type tag.
You know what? I'm just going to copy from the documentation. I have the documentation tab
Yeah.
open right here so that I don't embarrass myself in front of all the audience. So I know for a fact that inside of the MGT login component, I have a template called signed in button content. This is going to change what this button is going to look like. If you remember, it used to be a little giraffe and then my name. So what if I only wanted to show my name? So I'm just going to add a div inside of it, and inside of the div, the way that we bind data is to have double, what do you call it, mustache brackets?
I say curly brace. Mustache works.
So, and then in here, you can say like, I only wanted to show my given name. Given name. So now if I save it and go back to my, right here, you can only see my given name.
No giraffe.
So
Giraffe.
instead of the giraffe and my last name, you can only see who this person is by my first name. So very simple, right? Like you can just go ahead and add templates to your components. And I have another example. I'm just going to copy and paste it in here, and we can look at it to save time. Is what if I wanted to use person component, and instead of showing the person's details, I only want to show, my given name and added something to it. So if I save this, this is going to show my Beth. And then the little smiley face.
So the person is basically like a contact card. I can see information about a person.
Right. So if I comment this out, we'll see what it orange line look like. So for person, you'd have to supply some sort of a query to know, if it's getting me or getting someone by ID or what have you. So now that I save this page, I come back, normally, or by default, it shows just my profile picture. And things that you can also do is, now you see that I rely on the playground so much. If I go to person, go to properties, you can say, I want to modify the view to have 1 line, 2 line, 3 lines, and I can do view equals 3 lines. And I save that and come back to this document. Now you can see it shows my name, my email, and my title. Okay. And you can also modify these lines specifically for the attributes is called line 1 property, line 2 property, and etc. to change what to show right here. And then the component itself will know how to process this. Okay. But at the same time,
and that person query, by the way, is going to be the current user.
Right. So if I have me in there, it'll be the current user. If I have, I think you can just pass in a, what's it called, alias. Here, let's look at the playground again. Person query. Not that one. More examples. This one doesn't give me anything either. So I'm pretty sure you can pass in like, there's like user ID. You can use user ID to pass in user ID, and you can use person query to use someone's user principal name or email address or alias. So maybe we'll see in the docs. Okay. Person query. Allow the developer to define name of a person for a component. Yeah. Clearly, you can also use the name. But there's more like detailed information about these attributes in the docs page as well. So anyways, so once I apply the template, as you can see, if I don't supply the data type for the template, it'll just go to the default one, and the default one is to modify, the person template. And you can also modify things like loading template, no data template, depends on what these components support. So that'll be up to the developer. So that's another way of customizing the look and feel of your components. And there are a lot of things that come with the templates. For example, other than data type, you can do things like changing the binding syntax from the double mustache brackets to what are those called?
Square brackets.
Square brackets. If you're an Angular developer, because the mustache brackets actually clashes with the Angular ways of binding data. So you can change out the template helper by doing that, which we also have a story right here in general. And then templating, change binding syntax. What you're going to do is right here, you're going to import the template helper and then set binding syntax, and that's it. And a lot of times people are like, what if I wanted to just quickly see what's in this template? Like, I don't know what kind of data it is, like what's default. And I'm just, if you're like me, I don't like going to documentation is my last resort. I just clear. And when I rate them, I don't rate them completely, and I complain about it for like an hour, and then I see this one line in the middle of the page with the exclamation mark in front of it and says, "Note, you should do this." And I was like, I wish I known this an hour ago.
Why didn't you put this on the page? Like, nice, big, bold, red letters. Like,
don't we all complain about this? It's not just me, right?
All the time. Like the number of times that I will, try and do something and it fails and fails and fails. Like, okay, this thing has got to be broken. And then I go back and I read the docs and exactly that. Like, I missed something really obvious.
You're like, oh yeah, somebody already told me how to do this. Yeah. I just, didn't pay attention.
I didn't follow the instructions and it's not working. I can't figure this out.
I think this needs a div. Give me 1 second. So I was gonna show a very quick example of how to troubleshoot. So what if you come to a page and you added MGT agenda, which let's comment out this line. You can say that I wanted the agenda component to show me from today for 3 days, and I want my events to be grouped by day. So you can see Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday I show 3 days, and all the events are grouped by day. But I only wanted to show the event title. So I'm assuming these are called the event title. So when I uncomment this line, there's nothing show up on the page. Well,
That's always annoying.
What do I do? First of all, you should look at the data type and make sure that you're using the right data type, which in this case, it happens to be the default one, but it's always nice to have the data type, which is event. And now that group by day is showing up, but I still don't have the event title. So I'm curious if how the event structure as an object actually look like. So what I could do is you can pass in this. It's something that you can put into your bracket directly, and it shows you the raw data.
This is basically console log.
Yes. So that was the next thing that I was going to do. If you want to look at this as a JSON structure, which your console would manage it a lot better, you can just do console.log this.
No.
And right here.
No.
You can see all the events. Nicely structured.
You shouldn't be encouraging my bad behavior.
So now you can see instead of title, it should be called subject. So, I did it wrong. So I'm going to do on purpose, but still. Event.subject. Okay, now it's going to go through all of my event and find the subject and list all of them for me and group them by day very nicely.
That's cool. By the way, all kidding aside, I love the fact that that console log is there, because that's like that behavior that you just showed off there. That's so frequently, like if I have a variable, if I have an object and I don't know what it is, that's almost always how I'm going to do it, is, just print or console log or otherwise. Like, yeah, I know that
Right.
there's a debugger that I could go ahead and use and I could set up if I could figure out how to actually set that up, which I think is going to require reading a documentation or something, and we all know that's not going to happen. So no, I love the fact that you've got that console log that's baked right in, because that's exactly
Right.
how I do it. And yeah.
So we just, it's the curly brackets essentially just give you ways of accessing JavaScript, and console log is a JavaScript function. So of course you can use it inside of the curly bracket. And so that's just a quick, trick of how to log all of these things inside of a template, so that immediately like what's everything that you can access. Things that you can do also are like looping through the data. I'm not going to go into details about it, but you can definitely look at it in the documentation. You can do conditional rendering using data if. Looping is data for. And there's also something called template context that you can introduce your own data or functions as part of the template, so that can be used to format or do whatever function with your data that way. And I'll show you an example here shortly, so I don't have to type everything out, but keep in mind that there's a template context that's part of these templates as well.
Okay, that's cool. So if I have my own JavaScript objects, if as long as they match what the Graph Toolkit component is expecting, I could then feed it into that and get that same behavior. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, I think there's actually, maybe we have something here. Anyways, I have a demo.
That's right.
I can show you guys here in a minute. And then, so that's, template context and converters. And the one last thing that you could also do is to bind events or property as part of the binding. So I think this one is actually using that, which reminded me that we can do this. I totally didn't plan for this. But you could use something called data props and then passing a click event to bind as part of the template. So now if I select the channel, this is our channel picker. For the connected user, apparently this is not working, or that channel is not working. I'm just going to pick a different channel. I know this one works, because this one actually has content. The works means like there are things in this to use. So right now, like if I scroll down and actually...
No, I appreciate that no try again, as you had to go back in and try again a couple of times.
I know, right? So right here, we have a click event bind to each of these divs. So if I click on it, okay, see, it actually shows me a input that then I can type something to respond to this message and hit reply. So this saves you, time to bind event by adding event listeners. In the JS, you can see that this is right here is how we are adding the message click as part of the template context to be used inside of HTML as a click event. So lots of things that you can do with template. Make sure that you go to our documentation.
Do you have an AKMS for your docs?
Yeah, it's aka.ms/mgt-docs.
That's pretty straightforward.
In the customize component section, there's templating components that you can go look at. That's all about templating. So lots of goodies. So we've now talked about theming your components, how to use template to update your components with data and formatting these data, and how to troubleshoot by using this or console log this. The next thing that I wanted to talk about, I know we have limited time. Next two things.
10-15 minutes. About 10 minutes, let's say.
10-15 minutes. Okay, I'll keep it short so that if you have questions, we can discuss it outside of this meeting. So one thing is Microsoft Graph Toolkit actually handles front-end caching for you, so that when you make the Microsoft Graph call, if it's spendy, for example, when you're getting a person or a list of people, you have to call graph ones, get the list of people, and then call each person's endpoint to get their profile image if you want to do that. So that together is a lot of cost and it takes time, right? And when you render a page, the most important thing is to keep the rendering time short so that your user actually stay on the page without going anywhere. By implementing the caching mechanism, we're helping you caching all the data that's already retrieved from Graph and save it in your local storage in your browser. And you can set these, there's a couple things that you can set for caching, such as, let's just go through documentation real quick.
By the way, while you bring that up, and I'm going to ask you this question, and if you don't know the answer, that's totally cool. I might be setting you up for failure here, and I apologize. Do you know if that local caching, if that works with a progressive web app or PWA?
I assume it would.
Okay. It would be my guess as well, but I wanted to at least ask the question. But that's all right.
Well, yep. It's using different mechanisms, right? Like we are using a plugin that when you open up your browser, as long as it's the same place, it'll work the same. But I'm not sure. So we are using right here in the application IndexedDB. We have a mechanism to link the data to IndexedDB, and it stores in the IndexedDB and it refreshes based on the time limit that you set. And then PWA Builder or PWA Apps is kind of, you use a service worker to configure what are the things that you want to store. But what I'm trying to say is, as long as it stores in a different place, or in the similar place, it'll be translated to kind of a similar result. If not, then I assume since it's still a web app, it'll still be part of the IndexedDB anyways.
It seems to me like it would work. Well, I'll have to go explore. Let's not rabbit hole on that.
I'd have to look into it a little bit better. Speaking of which, our team also, one of our sister teams is the PW Builder team. So if you want to build progressive web apps or have someone talk about that, I'd be happy to connect you with them as well.
Appreciate that.
Anyways, going back to the cache service. So you can enable cache for different components by using the cache service and tap into the config and say that I wanted to configure only users or only files or photos, different things. And you can also clear cache and set invalidation period, which by default, I guess this is divided by 63 minutes or 30 minutes.
I was told there would be no math.
I think it's 30 minutes. Except, so most of the components are cached for, let's just say, this amount of time. And then, except if you are we're also getting, presence for a person's profile. So for that, we are actually enabling the caching to be pulled more frequently, so that whomever that you're looking at status is up to date. You can also create your own cache store to store data using the cache service that's already in there. And then that's caching. And to look at cache, like I said, all you need to do is go to your dev console. Up a little bit. Right here in the application, IndexedDB, now you can see I have all these things cached already in different DBs. These are the tabs that are already opened. If you remember, we've looked at file list, which includes Mgt files. We've looked at a lot of people, and then they have photos, and then there are users. So when you expand them, you can see, these are the information that's sort of cached in your browser.
Cool. And that's already there. Like, there's nothing you don't have to do anything to enable that. That's just automatically enabled.
Correct. By default, it's turned on, but you can always turn it off if you don't like it. So this really accelerates your application to load faster once it's already loaded once in the browser, which is something that we introduced, I think, last September. And it's been asked a lot too. I know. I have to think about it. I was like, I've been sitting in front of my computer at home for like a year and a half now. All time flies. Anyways, that's caching. And then the one last thing is if you want to quickly prototype with Microsoft Graph Toolkit, but there's no components that bind to the API that you wanted to prototype with, there's this component. It's called Mgt Git right here. This helps you make Git calls by resource, and you can specify version and scopes of Microsoft Graph endpoints, and it will retrieve data for you. And then you can put a template inside of it and see what it's going to look like with all the data that you already retrieved from this endpoint. Isn't it cool? You don't have to write a single line of JavaScript to do that. So, for example, I don't think we have that here, but what if this is something that I stole from the Cloud Advocates? They come up with this, Aicha, Waldeck, and that team. They came up with this sample, so it's not
those
mine.
Cloud Advocates. You just can't trust us.
What if I wanted to show my notebooks from OneNote? So the endpoint would be, graph.microsoft.com/me/one or /v1/me/OneNote/notebooks, and then so that's the endpoint that you pass in as part of the resource attribute for Mgt Get. And then you just need to figure out what the scopes are that's needed for this call. And inside of the template, you'd be able to say, for every note in this value that I wanted to see the URL of the note, and then show some sort of information about who created it. So very fast if you want to prototype something with Microsoft Graph Toolkit, because we're already using the SDK behind the scenes. So you have the Graph client attached to your, when you add the, either via NPM or via the script tag. So all of those are there for you. And you can, there's no JS, maybe some CSS. I guess I can remove them if I want to. There's no JS attached to it. And just very quickly, this is very handy for you to prototype apps. So with all of this, I have a demo. I think what I'm going to do is just copy and paste the final version since we have limited time. Let me just post this port. Save this, post this. So this is a demo that I was going to show you. At the early stage, there was really nothing in this file. If you remember, we've started with adding a authentication provider, which is MSL2 provider. We added a login, and there's nothing here that's actually functional, right? You can see that I added some stuff and articles and headers with images in this asset folder. It's all just fluff. So if I save this, click go live, and go back to port 5500, this is what it looked like. So this is your onboarding day in a view type of application, where in this page I only have a login component enabled right now. So what I'm going to do is I was going to type it out one by one of showing how each of these works, but I'm just going to copy and paste. So that, it's 3:53, there's no time. So this is kind of a explanation of how everything works together. So what if I wanted to say, welcome to apps, and then my name on it? So in this case, you can use Mgt person component with a template that only shows the given name and that little face that we were talking about at the beginning of the session. This way, it makes it personal. And it says, welcome to this organization, Beth. A little smiley face. Who doesn't like them? And then
welcome back to the little smiley face.
I know. In the main section, I wanted to add three things. I want to see my agenda. So I'm going to uncomment agenda. I'm going to see my to-dos on my Microsoft To-Do. And then people that I work with, which is just called Mgt people. And like you see, there's really nothing, there's no templating in here, right? So by default, these are all the default components and what it would look like. So I'm going to save this page again, come back. You can see there's data coming through already. So in the timeline, you can see my calendar events, and then these are all my to-dos. Clearly, I've already prepped for this for 5 minutes yesterday. No, I'm just kidding. It took a while. And there are other things that I need to do with my team that I've been putting off because I have to be preparing for this. Otherwise, Christopher's going to be on me. So I better keep track of them so I don't forget. And then the last thing is who's the people that I work mostly with. but this clearly doesn't, look all together kind of, what if I only wanted to show simple tasks of names and due dates and change the look and feel of the timeline and I show like a list of people here. What we're going to do is adding these templates, and I'm going to just quickly explain what the template does. In the agenda template, what I did was, this is what I was talking about, using functions as part of the data, template context. So this is a function that I introduced as part of Mgt agenda by tagging it to the template as part of Mgt agenda. What I did here is in the script, I can select Mgt agenda and then say I wanted to modify the template context by giving it a couple of different functions that I can be using directly inside of the template. So one of them is, I wanted to format the date from the UTC time that returns is always ugly, and I wanted to show the time range in whatever pretty format that I wanted. So now I can call these functions within the template of Mgt agenda directly, as you saw right here. I'm passing in the data that's coming from the template into this function in order to get the result of what the date time would look like. So this is where your applause. Very cool. Thank you. Sorry. And now when I save it and come back, come back right here, you can see that the timeline looks completely different from before, right? Like these are just HTML and like 2 functions, and that's it. Or maybe some CSS again. Like I'm completely modifying the look and feel of the agenda item. And then
it's
we're going to do
far less than if I was having to write all of that on my own.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Which is why we think templating is very useful for people who want to, utilize these syntax of, you can even add it as part of the attributes. Isn't it great?
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on to do. So in the template of to do, what I'm simply doing is also like attaching a function, and then I only wanted to see the title of each of my to do instead of all that, crap. And then for Mgt people, I also templated it right here, adding it here, so that you can see if this person exists as a condition. In all these people that I work with, I'm going to show this person's name, and I wanted to see their job title, and their backup is a male. So this is where I was talking about you can change the properties of each line to fit into your needs, and there are actually ways to do this. So I'm going to save this, come back. Ta-da! Now I have a timeline view of my agenda, and to do is very clean, only the due date and the title. And under my team, I can see everybody's, what's their function of the job is right there next to them. And then if I wanted to contact them, I'll just look at their detailed person card and see what my interaction has been with them. Great.
That's very cool. That's really cool. And really, like, trying to do that from scratch would take so much more code than all of that. So yeah, I have to say that every single time you're here to show off Graph Toolkit, I'm just like, I'm blown away by the power of this. So yeah, so thanks for coming on, showing all of that off. You can go find Beth on Twitter at Beth_PanX, and you can also go check out all the documentation at aka.ms/mgt-docs, which is in all of the various chat windows. So thanks again to Beth for being here. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. That's Web Wednesday. So thank you. Bye.
Bye.